Hello folks, and welcome once again to Gotham City Knights. This video will be a Batman Miniatures Game 3rd Edition Battle Report. This is our 8th video now, and due to time constraints and technical difficulties the last time we tried to film in person, this one has again been played on Tabletop Simulator. We here at Gotham City Knights seek to not just show you how our games play out, but also give you insight to our strategic and tactical thinking throughout. My name is Kaiwas, and my opponent again is Salandra. And today we're pitting the Joker against the Court of Owls. As we switch roles, with Salandra taking the Court of Owls this time, as you saw me stumble through the prey mechanic the last time out. So it should be a fun one, so let's look at both of the crews. So we take a look now at Salandra's list, the Court of Owls, aptly named Stabby Time. As you remember, the Court of Owls are quite an elite crew. They'll always have a low model count, but those models are always very, very useful and always will do a lot during their activations. And helping, I guess, buff that crew up is the Court as the leader. Pretty much the modern day choice for these folks, I think, over the Lincoln March, who is more like a Court of Owls Batman kind of 125 rep. This one at 250 rep is very much about support, and effectively helps the rest of the crew getting on with what they do. Calvin Rose Talon, he is the new miniature, the free agent, has the choice of doing double stun or using that owl knife. Salandra has loaded him up with, again, the ability to be faster through genetic alteration and the hunter training, which gives him, at this point, the tracking special action. I know that's been updated in the app just in the last hour or so. But then we look at the henchmen in the crew, which is actually probably the strength. You've got William Cobb, who is one of the few henchmen in the game that brings himself a objective card, especially one which does as much killing as he does. Again, loaded up to make him as fast as possible with the grapple gun and genetic alteration. You got Strix. Strix is a straight murderer. Her paired katanas are awful, unless you're the one dealing out the damage. Ephraim Newhouse is in the crew, mainly for his primary target, which allows the Owls to treat a suspect as friendly during his activation, which is in the opponent. So effectively, the prey mechanic is all about using suspects to mark people as prey. So without having to put down one of your own suspects to do that, Ephraim basically facilitates that. And then rounding it out, literally for the last 51 rep, with a little bit to spare, is O'Malley's father, who has the Master Fighter trait, which makes him very, very reliable in hand-to-hand, also with that fast upgrade. So looking at the Owls objective deck, you have the 3 character cards and 20 normal objective cards. William Cobb brings his own objective card, as mentioned, easily used to mark people as prey and cycle through. Also allows you to score it whenever you remove the boss or the highest rep miniature. Court's Edict, a little bit harder to score as you have to remove 2 enemies as prey in the same round, but the resource is very important for such an elite crew that if you lose one body, it could be disastrous. Court's Edict lets you bring one of those reanimated Owls back to life. Calvin Rose's card is probably one of the easiest to score in this crew because you just designate your boss in the last round, and all he has to do is not be removed due to the removal of suspects. The rest of the deck is basically built out with 18 of 20 of the Owls cards. The only one missing is the Owls Knight, which Salandra and I had looked at a lot of times and found difficult to score in other matchups. Mostly the Owls deck is built off marking people as prey and removing them from the gaming area, or removing the boss or the highest reputation miniature, and a lot of the resources related on these cards are to do with controlling the people who are prey or marking new ones as prey. The only 2 that Salandra took outside the Court of Owls is the 2 stalwarts in her decks, which would be Die Hard and Overdrive. Always very good to find space for those in any deck. Over to my crew, which is the Joker affiliation. As mentioned, I can never leave out my favourite Joker boss unless something comes up and bites me in the knee and tells me otherwise. The Joker Arkham Asylum is the one for me. The fact that he has the survivability and all the other tricks that we mentioned in our Moment of Glory series, he's definitely the one that goes straight in my list and takes 105 points out. Next up, I did change a lot from the other times you've seen me run Joker. I sort of went for more miniatures on the board because facing a Court of Owls crew, I expected things to disappear left and right. I also put an emphasis on getting cheap guns on the table so that if one gun is removed, that doesn't mean that I am without shooting options, because the Owls, as much as there are some acrobats, are going to not enjoy a lot of chip damage. The one new thing I'm trying out here, other than those cheap guns, is the sidekick Archie. Archie was one of the biggest negative play experiences ever in 2nd edition, but thankfully they've turned him into something quite different in 3rd edition. He used to basically negate any scoring of points back in 2E, but now he basically just causes people to have to effort to make actions within 6 inches of him. He can't be killed, so whenever he gets up to his endurance limit on damage, my opponent, in this case Salandra, just gets to sort of push him 4 inches away, keep him out of the way of what she's trying to get up to, whereas I'm trying to run him back in there to get in the way and mess things up a little bit. Knowing what I said about taking more miniatures in this list, I knew that I was going to lose more miniatures over the course of the game. So, as Joker is always want to do, he's going to want to score points when that happens. So, we always have our seasoning the mix. So, I want to get the people poisoned and get the points rolling that way if Salandra starts to remove poisoned people. The one new thing that you'll see here is the Psychopaths card, which is the new card that was added to the Joker deck along with the Year 1 releases and the re-release of the Back to Gotham set. The Psychopaths card basically is played during Phase 2 and ticks up with attack markers every time someone is KO'd or casualtied that turn. It also ticks up with defense markers every time a enemy model places a suspect. At the end of the round, you compare the attack to defense markers on the card, and it's scored if there are more attack than defense markers. So again, leaning into that, I'm going to kill as many people, but also, if they kill me, I'm going to score off it. A lot of the rest of the cards are the Joker staples. You've got Let Them In the Joke, Teeth, Fish, and the Joker character card itself, Showtime. Obviously, we still have Condiment King in, just for his Sauce and Pickles card, and also his wonderful guns that put out so many different effects. So now the pre-game stuff. We're looking at the deployment type and the event card that we pulled. The Vanguard is the 12-inch triangles opposite each other, and we get to deploy one friendly model 4 inches outside the deployment zone. Pretty standard. Corners are one thing that you have to learn to live with in this game. And the Heavy Rain is probably one of my most hated objectives, because it seems that probably 87.5% of the time I'm rolling a 4-up on that, and I'm usually the one taking more guns. But what it means is at the start of every round on a 4-up, basically it's raining really, really heavy, and thus you lose the strength dice, or one less die from a ranged attack. Quickly now through the urban furniture, which would have been done obviously before deployment zones were revealed and chosen. You can see two of the lights and 2 of the sewers on top of buildings. No prices for guessing who placed those up there. Salandra wanting to basically keep me slow and keep my guns out of the way. I tried to get some use out of the lights, placing them in the sort of main firing alleys where I thought people might be coming from. Same with the sewers in places that might help me get places. So one deep in her deployment zone, as it turned out, and one near the junction at the middle of the board. Deployments then, I chose the southeast side of the board, as I thought the approach to the middle of the board was easier for me, where Salandra was in the northwest. I basically bunged everyone around Joker, lots of henchmen plus Archie, and then Ras the Clown was out in front, hoping for me to use that handyman trait that he has to get a lot of suspects out and managed in the first turn. On Salandra's side, she only had to put 3 of her henchmen into the deployment zone: Strix, Talon, William Cobb, and Father O'Malley, or O'Malley's dad, as we kept referring to him as. Ephraim was the person who was 4 inches outside the deployment zone. Calvin Rose was in the deployment zone, but he had his scout move before the turn started, which allowed him to really put pressure on the middle of the board. And the court is a hidden miniature, basically again putting pressure on the area where Salandra wanted the fight to go down. I'll mention at this point we both had an undercover miniature that we actually forgot to place undercover. I had Buffon and Salandra had William Cobb. but neither of them struggled to get use out of where they were anyway. Last thing to mention was the oil advice markers, which were placed out at the start of the game by the court. 3 of them in total. 2 of them were placed, one down the middle alley and one on the alley on the east side, in order to basically surround where the Joker crew might go in the first turn, allowing the prey markers and those sort of scoring to get started nice and early. And then you've got one hanging back at the T-junction, more than likely to score the court secure base objective card, which is to do with people not being around oil markers. So that's what we got for deployment and pre-game stuff. Let's move on to the Raise the Plan. So here we are at the end of the Raise the Plan phase. We rolled off for initiative and I won the roll, taking first this time. Salandra then, as the meme goes, it seems in every single game we have, she always seems to find a way to have Die Hard in her opening hand, even though there's only 1 copy and there are 23 cards in her deck and you can only mulligan 4. Somehow it always ends up there. She played it out on to Ephraim, so if he's alive at the end of the round, then she gets the 2 points. Moved on to phase 2, where I played the new card Psychopaths. I didn't expect anything really to happen in the first round where I might actually get to kill things as compared to the amount of suspects played out, but it allowed me to get it out of my hand and keep moving through to other things I might score. Then Salandra played the Terrible Accent card, which is basically, again, cycling for her. You know, basically she would have to remove the Joker this turn to score that. Not likely, but again, it gets it out of the hand so you can play other things. And the Gotham is Ours objective, which effectively has places 3 suspects onto the board. Now, some of the use of this is in order to get the Isles suspects that they can use to mark as prey early on. But Salandra wanted to get that early scoring going, so she decided on locations around the board that were not going to be removed. So that at the end of the turn, if they were still there, or if they'd been removed and had been replaced by someone else, then she'll be able to score the Gotham is Ours card. We rolled off and it was raining this round, and then on to Audacity. The only crew that had to really put out Audacity was the court. Calvin Rose, Ephraim Newhouse, Strix and William Cobb were the beneficiaries. The Joker crew don't really have to put out Audacity because of his Chaos Agent rule, which basically means their Audacity sits in a nice, neat or not so neat stack off to the side of the board, and when each miniature activates, it can choose to take one of those Audacity from that pile if it has the Trickster trait, which is basically the Joker plus all of his henchmen. Archie is basically the only person I might ever have to give an Audacity to if I want him to do more than just 1 action per turn. So it's pretty nice and pretty flexible for the Joker. First activation for the Joker crew was Rastaclown, and I wanted to get the scoring rolling with the self-harm in the Joker crew. Rastaclown has the Handyman trait, so even with not using an Audacity, he gets an Inspire because he started with an 8 of Joker, has his normal move, and that free Manipulate, meaning he has 3 actions. So I used all of them. I jumped over to the other side of this car and this chain link fence, if you can see. Placed a suspect down, which I played the Bite the Dust objective card out, which basically turns it into a exploding teeth marker as well as a suspect, which counts down. We didn't even bother rolling the dice though, because with my free Manipulate left, I lifted up those teeth, and as you can see on the card, when the marker is revealed, you center the explosive template on it, as well as whenever the counter is reduced to 0. Anyone affected underneath the template suffers blood damage, and if anyone suffers any damage as a result, then you get to score the card. And both players have to discard a card randomly from their hand. So that was 2 points off a very cheap activation. Court responded with Ephraim Newhouse, who had been deployed slightly further up the board. Salandra didn't like the look of the lamppost that was in sort of just in front of her deployment zone, so she decided to pop over the side of all of the building materials and destroy it with his tactical action, really shutting down any long range stuff that I might have a go at later in the game. One note, Salandra did play the Court Secure Bases objective card on my turn last round, so this has already ticked up to 1. Once that hits 3, then it scores. Basically, it ticks up every time one of my activations finishes and I don't have a miniature within 4 inches of the Isle advice marker that has been chosen. So next up, I decided to use probably the least impactful activation of the round with Archie. As I said, he didn't have Audacity, didn't give him Audacity at the start of the round, so all he was going to do really was move out of the deployment zone and create up what I've pretty much now dubbed a sad zone, with that 6-inch radius out from his base, where other people have to effort to perform actions. Next up is the actual court, and the court again didn't have an Audacity marker, so all they wanted to do was set up a potential prey situation by placing out a suspect right smack bang between those two oil markers. Now you'll note that the court secure bases has continued to tick up after Archie's activation, so it's now at 2. It'll score at 3. Next up, I just continued using activations without Audacity to see if anything would appear that I might be able to do anything to. But Condiment King was next up. He decided just to charge forward and use his Inspire to place down a suspect. That suspect was within 4 inches of the court. Therefore, I was able to score the Let Them In on the Joke card. And then, effectively, again, both of us had to discard a card. So it was another 2 points for Joker. However, I didn't end my activation within 4 inches of the court secure base identified oil marker. So that ticked up to 3, and Salandra got 2 on the board early on as well. Next was O'Malley's father, or as we were noted, Papa O'Malley or O'Malley's da. Basically, it depended on how good he was being as to what sort of nickname he got. But he didn't have an Audacity this turn, so all he did was move up to a flanking position to sort of bring the attack and the pain next round. Next, again, I used another one of the activations of one of the guns, because I really did foresee myself actually getting a clear shot this turn, especially with the rain. So I took Stan the Eyeball Man. I know it rhymes. He just danders out of the deployment zone just far enough to place down a suspect right on the verge, which was a fish marker with the It Doesn't Look Fresh objective card. So that's in play, hoping to score at the end of the round. If anyone else does decide to pick it up, it'll poison them. I also used the Let's Dance objective card to turn the 1 blood damage that was on Rastakline into stun, so that he would recover it and have a little bit more of a chance to survive any potential incoming attacks next round. It was also really to get it out of my hand, because I needed to see what else was there so I could keep scoring. Next up was William Cobb. Salandra's thing, usually with other crews, is getting as many suspects out as possible in turn 1, and then using that bank that she builds up either for scoring or other resource card abilities that allow you to do lots of things. And she continued on to, I suppose, fill the field with these suspects as William Cobb basically made his way into the fight. I suppose there wasn't really much else she wanted to do, so it wasn't a waste. And he again was set up in a nice flanking position for the next turn. One of the things I did include in this list that I haven't done before is some of the thugs from the Back to Gotham crew box, including the Thug 1 and Thug 4. One with a knife, one with an axe. One with an axe, Thug 4, was next to activate, and I actually used my first Audacity of the game. He basically looked at Rastakline and said, Rastakline, that was a nice trick. You scored some points for our crew. So I did the exact same thing. I ran out in front, placed down a suspect marker, which became a teeth marker. Didn't even bother rolling the dice, because I immediately used my free Inspire to lift that and score it, as it was centered over the Thug 4, dealing him 1 damage. One thing to note, I did use the Season the Mix resource at the start of the activation to move 2 of my suspects away to give myself a bit of space. So you'll see the one that Conduit King placed is now almost beside the court, and the fish has been pushed way into the corner beside that chain link fence. I was very wary that my own suspects could be used against me by the likes of Newhouse, and that I needed space to continue placing mine out to continue scoring points. Turn 1 was turning out to be just a lot of posturing from the Isles crew, building a bank of nasty blades that were going to come whittling into the Joker crew, probably turn 2 and 3 and 4. Strix was next to activate. Again, had an Audacity, but didn't really have any use for anything other than just the movement part of it, as she ended up behind Calvin, set up for an attack next turn. Bug 1, continuing with the Back to Gotham crew. He just basically came around the corner to stand beside Archie and share in his sad, sad life. No suspect out at this time because I didn't, again, want to block anything for my future scoring. So I just kept it was as it was. Again, Salandra was very wary of getting into the jaws of a mostly unactivated crew. So even though Calvin had the sort of scout maneuver that had him far up the board, when he activated next, he decided to meet the Joker crew head on along with the rest of the crew, potentially next turn. So he basically skipped across the road, jumped over the car, popped down a suspect, and hid behind the building for next turn. I believe he activated his tracking trait as well. And the reason that Salandra has these suspects out here is that if I potentially do over-engage, she can use one of those suspects to get the prey status onto one of my miniatures, and then that's the one they're going to jump on. I will note that during my turn, I again used the Season the Mix resource to move some of the suspects, but I chose not to actually move them at all. And you'll see where they are, just to spend it and get through it and move on. To save us a lot of talking, a lot of time, we're just going to skip to the part where I've moved the rest of my models because that was all that was left. The only key thing to say was Buffon moved up first, and then Ace of Spades moved into the mix and seasoned the mix effectively by spreading his poison gas through the Joker's gas trait around him. So you'll see that Thug 1, Eyeball Man, Buffon, Archie, and Condiment King all have the poison effect now. That'll set up, hopefully, when one of them dies, scoring the Poison the Mix card. The rest of everything I moved up, just Joker ever so slightly. I wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to be wiped off the board too early. Dynamite I didn't want really to get hit because he might explode. And Hobo Clown I had to keep safe and not in contact with someone because his special ability reads that basically he might attack the person he starts his activation next to. Here we are at the end of the round, just after the tracking abilities of both Strix and Calvin Rose have been used. The rolls weren't great for Salandra, but she was able to close the net a little bit when she used them to be ready to pounce next turn. So after we've done all the poison rolls and a little bit of blood damage was passed out throughout the crew, we then look at what was scored this turn. For Joker, the It Doesn't Look Fresh fish suspect towards the back of the board absolutely scored because it was still there. Bite the Dust, we saw 2 of those with the place and pick up mechanic. And then the Let Them In the joke that Condiment King popped down a suspect near the court. That also scored. Salandra, we saw the Die Hard that she placed earlier, and obviously Ephraim Newhouse didn't take any damage, never mind be casualty or KO'd. We saw the court secure base tick up to 3 right at the start of the game. And the Gotham is ours that we pretty much said was going to score immediately because it was never going to be challenged, as the suspects were still around the scenery elements that Salandra and I had chosen at the start of the round. That left the score at the end of the first round as 8 to Joker and 6 to the Court of Owls. So we rolled off going into the second round, and Salandra, with her 5 passes that she didn't spend in the first round, had the pretty much auto win on that roll and chose to go first as she looked to really remove someone very early. Phase 1 wise, I played out the Showtime and Die Hard cards. Showtime has had a change recently where it is actually only aimed at the boss. I rolled a big fat 2 on the D3, which meant there were going to be 4 turns before it scored. That dragged in 2 of Salandra's suspects that were close enough, and Joker basically has to be standing beside those, or at least one of those, at the end of those 4 turns in order for Showtime to score. Ballsy by Joker, always looking down the barrel of the gun and laughing. I then played out the Die Hard card on none other than Archie, because Archie can't die, and that's an easy free 2 points for me. Audacity wise, I didn't put any out myself, again, choosing to leave Archie toothless as he is, whereas Salandra chose William Cobb, Father O'Malley, Strix, and Calvin Rose. And the rain this time round was not pouring down. So during the Raise the Plan phase, I also chose to use the Overdrive resource to put out a Venom dose on the board right beside the fish. And we also noted at the start of the turn we rolled for heavy rain, and it wasn't raining this time, so I was hoping to bring some of my major amount of guns to bear. Once again, Ephraim was the first to activate. Again, didn't have an Audacity, but he did use that primary target trait this time round to effectively remove the fish off the board without revealing it, so he didn't get poisoned. He used that along with the resource on an owl's tail to mark Rasta Clown, the guy with the big assault rifle way down the board, as prey, because he was within 4 inches of an owl marker and 4 inches of that suspect, which during Ephraim's turn was friendly to the owls. Again, he didn't have much else to do with his turn, so he just sort of moved up and hopefully at some point might have use for him, might have use for those weapons he's carrying. So, fearing for his life as he'd just been marked as prey by one of the most deadly organizations in all of Gotham, Rasta Clown was the first to activate, and he decided that if he was going to go out, he was going to go out swinging, or at least chomping, or being chomped, or whatever. So he jumped over the other side of the car, and again used his Inspire and his Free Manipulate to place and reveal a teeth marker. Once again, getting a single blood damage onto himself, and once again scoring 2 points immediately. Taking immediate advantage of the newly acquired prey, William Cobb was next to activate with Audacity, popped his bat claw, or grapple gun, sorry, I suppose, since he's an owl, his oil claw. Flew down the board as fast as possible, right into the teeth of the entire Joker's list, as Rasta was right in front of that car, and just paid him. Salandra did use the Terrible Accident resource card, which meant that she got 3 free efforts. She was within 6 inches of Archie, so she did have to perform a single effort in order to do the attack action. But Rasta Clown had no chance, immediately went down, eviscerated, torn to bits. Salandra scored the Talon's Claw card, getting her 2 points and on the board in the round. And she was down a couple of points at this point, was looking to find ways back into the game. She knew that there were ways to potentially bring William Cobb back to life if the Joker crew did take him out at this point. But it was a bold move. I, on the other hand, was able to use the Psychopaths card as a resource that I recently drew into. That allowed me to basically put 2 free attack counters onto the Hobo Clown, beefing him up for a future attack. So an early use of my Audacity this round, as Conduit King was next up. He had a few things he wanted to achieve. So the first thing he did was pop down a suspect right beside Archie. Then he took aim at Talon, who had just appeared, and decided that Talon was going to eat some sauce and pickles, or mustard and ketchup, as the case may be. Both attacks hit as he used his gunman trait to fire twice, doing 4 blood damage to Talon, knocking him down with a crit, and giving him slow 4 and poison. So William Talon was lurching after all of the condiments were poured all over him, and it enabled me to score the Feeling Weird objective card as well by putting an effect on an enemy model. Also at the end of this turn, the Showtime card ticked down, and Joker was still in contact with those 2 suspects, so that was a nice other 3 points for me. So Strix was next up to activate, and with Audacity, popped around the corner, placed down a suspect quite close to the rest of the Joker crew, as you can see, just in front of them. It scored the Shadow Claw, which is basically when you place a suspect within 4 inches of an enemy model that has at least 1 blood damage. Then she used a suspect to mark Thug 1 as prey. It was over to Archie and trust him to bring the mood of the entire game down. He looked to his left and decided that suspect, Condiment King, probably some formed bag of extra ketchup, had left down, was actually a very, very valuable commodity, as he grabbed it up and stuffed it in his tiny little pockets. So I was able to get that card out, valuable commodities, onto a miniature that can't be knocked out or casualtied. So it was very, very helpful for me. Just as a note before we move on, Salandra played the Isles Labyrinth out on my activation of Archie, playing it on Thug 1, who was the current prey. Basically, if he, when during his next activation, moves, Salandra scores it. If he doesn't move, he gets Enervating 2. So it's very pleasant for at least setting up a kill or getting an easy 2 points. On my own activation, next, because Salandra passed using one of her 5 passes, I took Stan the Eyeball Man, used his Inspire to place a suspect, which again was another fish, down towards that bottom end of the board. And then just moved him into the middle, hoping to use that gun next turn, not using an Audacity for Stan. Salandra did play the court secure bases once again, again on the Isle advice marker in the middle of the board, hoping for it to tick up quite easily, as I didn't want to press too much into the middle of her crew. Thug 1 was next up. He was probably one of the furthest forward and marked as prey, so I thought, let's get a use out of him before Salandra gets to kill him. The reason that Thug 1 was up is because Salandra passed again using another one of those 5 passes she started with. As Thug 1 was the prey, and as the Isle's Labyrinth card was placed on him, he didn't want to move, so he decided just instead to use the tactical action to place a suspect beside himself, scoring Let Them In on the joke, getting some points on the board before he potentially gets removed. That suspect was within 4 inches of Strix, and Thug 1 is a trickster, so that was cool. He didn't move though, so he did get the enervating 2 at the end of his activation. Thug 1 was smart to get his suspect game in before the Calvin Rose was next to activate. Calvin moved up the street with impunity, popped down beside the poor little thug who was enervated, and effectively said, "Would you like to effort in response to my attack?" The little thug said, "I will effort as much as I possibly can," which is a grand total of 1. And Calvin Rose says, "Well, I'm not efforting him at all," which scored Salandra the overdrive card. Never mind the fact that the thug went down in a sack of viscera and blood, never to be seen again. This did allow the court to use a special action because the casualty was caused. Basically goaded Little Archie. Little Archie didn't have the willpower for it and basically ran away scared. Salandra then basically tightened the net with a couple of the oil markers, one of the oil markers moving to try and set up more preys and scoring of the likes of the oil's tail in the future. I used, once again, the Psychopath's resource in order to put a couple of attack markers down onto Thug 4, the one with the axe, again to set up a big swing later on in the game. Weren't any more of the court left to attack, and not many of them were actually going to threaten me, so I decided to act with a bit more impunity. Buffon was next to activate. Before he went anywhere, William Cobb was close enough, and one of the suspects, one of the blue suspects down at the bottom, were close enough for Salandra to mark Buffon as prey with the William Cobb resource card called the Mission. Buffon then decided to take the rest of his turn. He levelled his nail gun, pointing directly at Calvin Rose, and gets a bonus because all of the nails were going towards Calvin Rose, and did a nice amount of damage, 3 blood damage into the Calvin Rose acrobat, who acrobated a few times to get some of the dice. Calvin then activated his escape artist trait, which means whenever he takes damage, he gets to basically dodge 4 inches away, again sort of backing off a little bit and making himself a little bit less in trouble. Buffon, emboldened by that, decided to go and stand over by the prone body of William Cobb, who'd been knocked down earlier, place a suspect out, and then scored the Let Them In on the joke card. Court was up next for the Court of Owls, and they didn't have an Audacity, but they were down in the mix and they popped the boss's orders bonus to attack early in the round, and Ras the Clown died, so Salandra wanted to reposition that. Used the Isle's Perch special to move down to where you see the court now, within 4 of that Isle advice marker, right in the teeth of the Joker crew. And then decided that poor little Buffon had to go a little walk away from where he was, closer to O'Malley's father, in order to get him killed. So to do so, Salandra used the Isle's Labyrinth card as a resource, which is moving an enemy model marked as prey 4 inches. There is another bit of text to that, which you'll see later on, where you can teleport people beside sewers if they are close enough to an oil marker. But at this point, she just wanted to get him into range of the murderous father around the corner. So having seen that Salandra had used the last of her resource points for the round, what I wanted to do was take full advantage of the fact that William Cobb was sitting as a lame duck, or lame owl, I guess. I had Lots of attack counters stored up on Hobo Clown through the Psychopath's resource early in the turn, so I decided to give one of the cheapest miniatures on the board on Audacity for the round. Hobo Clown basically bounded past the invisible intel support version of the court, stood beside the prone version of William Cobb, and lifted his horribly damaging heavy sharp meat knife. It's a lovely name for a weapon. All the bonuses to hit because he's knocked down, and the aggressive schizophrenia trait. I basically put enough damage into the poisoned body of William Cobb, and I was able to score the Season the Mix card because I removed as casually a miniature suffering the poison effect. Last activation of the court is O'Malley, and obviously this one had been set up for a long time. Buffon had been pushed out of the way of the middle of the crew and in the range of the boss's orders. So O'Malley popped over and basically did his thing. Buffon, like all of the rest of the clowns, isn't going to survive very long. Stiff breeze will blow them over, but these oils are vicious. Thankfully for me, he was suffering the poison condition, so 2 activations in a row I was able to score the Season the Mix card. Salandra did as well pop out another Court's secure basis at this point to get that counting up, and again scoring her more points. One thing I actually forgot to mention on the Hobo Clown activation was that I revealed the last suspect marker that was down there from the Showtime card of the court. So basically trying to remove the ability to mark anyone new as prey without them playing any more suspects out. With the dead Buffon, the court once again decided to tighten the net with the oil advice markers and goaded Thug 4, who had the last extra attack markers that I had through the Psychopath's resource, away as far as possible from the rest of her crew. So Joker took this opportunity to move up again, trying to keep all the sort of protect me bodyguards around him, and didn't really have any other things to do. So before he moved, he fired off his remote control teeth, aiming it at Calvin Rose, which would have put the template over he and Strix. Both he and Strix decided that they were going to effort to acrobat out of the way of it, so reducing that strength dice down to just an attack dice. And I think both of them actually missed in the end, not doing any extra damage. He then decided, as I said, to move up the street and gas them all, putting out poison on some more people. Well, at this point, I was trying to set up a potential score of the Sauce and Pickles card from the Condiment King. But again, it's just his thing, and any sort of chip damage I could get through onto these folks would be great for me. Quick one here now from Thug 4. He'd been goaded away, and he decided to continue to put the pressure that his extra attack counters and nasty axe weapon has, and added to it by going and grabbing the venom container that I dropped at the start of this turn, and consolidating where he's standing, hoping to jump on someone who falls foul to thinking that he's only a little tiny thug next turn. At this point, Dynamite, who has every opportunity to kill as many of my guys as any of Salandra's guys, had to be positioned very carefully. Snuck him round the edge of this building so that he is in place for next turn. Didn't do anything else with him. Last activation in the round, I'm just trying to get something useful out of anything. I took Ace of Spades and just tried to chuck one of his gas grenades at the 2 court mooks up the street, but both missed, so there was no further poison effects put out onto them. So looking at cards scored this turn, we have the 1 Talon's Claw scored from the removal of Rastaclan. We have 2 Court Secure Bases, which ticked up throughout the turn, and Shadow's Claw from Strix placing a suspect near Thug 1, and the Overdrive when Calvin came in and didn't effort when he removed said Thug 1. So looking back on it, I didn't actually know I'd scored this many points. It's a bit ridiculous. There's in total 19 points scored by the Joker side. 2 copies of Let Them In the Joke, 2 copies of the, some might say difficult to score, Seasoning the Mix. I'm Feeling Weird from Condiment King shooting at William Cobb. It doesn't look fresh when Stanley Abelman placed that suspect early on. Bite the Dust, Rasta did his trick again. Die Hard because Archie's sitting there not dying. And Showtime because the Joker made that play early in the turn. Add to that the fact that Archie is carrying the valuable commodities that the Convict King put out. All in all, a ridiculous turn for the Joker side, and the final score at this point, after 2 rounds, is 27-16. After all that scoring, we run straight into round 3. Round 3, we rolled for rain, and once again, there wasn't any rain, so at this point, the weather in Gotham was definitely on the ups. Rolled for take the lead. I believe Salandra had a number of passes from last round, and she didn't need any of them because I rolled a big fat 1. So she was first to activate this round. In phase 1, there were no cards played out, but in phase 2, Salandra played Terrible Accident, hoping once again to have a pop at the Joker, and again just to cycle through cards, hope just by chance maybe get to score that at any point. I then played out the Psychopath's card, which I was pretty certain I was going to get some attack markers on this round because the combat was getting very close. Pretty much most of Salandra's crew were in and around my own. Salandra did at this point play a resource, which was the Court's Edict, which is the one which allows you to bring back a reanimated owl that has been killed, which is why she wasn't entirely tilted whenever I took Talon William Cobb off the board last round. So he popped back onto the board, right beside Stan the Eyeball Man, and no guesses for who might be activating next. Just as a note, the Court's Edict card does get removed from play, so you can't cycle through that multiple times once you use it as a resource. So that's it, done. No more risk of regeneration. So, as I intimated, William Cobb was the first to activate for Salandra. He didn't have Audacity, as you can see the Audacity on the other 4 henchmen of the crew, but he didn't need it because he started in base-to-base contact with Stan the Eyeball Man. So he took his Inspire from being within 8 inches of the Court, popped down a suspect right beside Stan, and then used that suspect immediately with the Owl's Tail resource to mark Stan as prey because he was close enough to one of the owl markers and the suspect. William Cobb then basically drew back his Owl's Knife and diced up poor Stan. As you can see, Mr. Cobb had to effort quite a bit because of the effect of Archie and also wanting to make sure that kill went through. With the kill, Salandra was able to score the Talon's Claw objective card by removing a miniature that was prey. And the effects of things dying, again, one of the owl markers being brought round the corner, trying to tighten the noose, and the Court, I believe, popped the boss's orders to really buff up all of the other henchmen that might be doing any attacking this turn. Quick note from Cobb's activation is that I, on the Joker side, played out the Psychopath's resource to sort of benefit from the fact that there was damage being dealt, popped another 2 attack counters onto Hobo Clown to continue to threaten on that flank. Next up to activate was one I'd been holding back for hilarity reasons. It was Dynamite. Dynamite, he took on a Dusty counter from the Chaos Agent pile and decided that the 2 friends, the 2 owls that were buddying up the middle of the road, needed to be his friend as well. So he charged past them, just so he wasn't too close to Joker, and decided he was going to take a swing at Strix. Took a swing at Strix. Strix defended herself with a couple of efforts, or at least one effort, and Dynamite thought, this is not why I'm here, I'm not going to effort at all, and he was able to score the Overdrive card. After every single one of his attacks was either missed or blocked, he, except I believe for the Strength dice, which actually was a knockdown, he then decided to blow himself up, because Dynamite gets to blow himself up. So after some furious reading of the rules, Salandra did accept that I could choose to blow myself up, and I did some pretty nice damage to both Strix and Calvin Rose, leaving them fairly close to death on both sides. Strix was almost indignant at the fact that someone had decided to come and have a swing at her, and then whenever they missed, actually blow themselves up to harm her. So she got up, dusted herself off, charged down the street, popped down a suspect with her Inspire from the Court. By doing so, obviously put another marker onto the Psychopaths for the Court. And then she scored the Shadow Claw card because she placed the suspect within 4 inches of quite a lot of enemy models that had blood markers on them. She then immediately used that suspect for using the resource on the Mission objective card while being within a certain range of William Cobb. bending that suspect to mark Ace of Spades as prey. She basically pulled both her paired katanas back and lopped Ace of Spades into lots of tiny little parts. He was very unhappy to leave, but the Joker's bunch didn't mind, because again they were able to pop another attack marker on Psychopaths and use another copy of Psychopaths to put more attack markers out on the board, this time on Joker himself. So the next activation up was Joker himself. Before I did anything, Salander was able to play a resource, the Gotham is Ours card, cycling through a little bit, but also just squeezing the top end of the fight with the oil marker coming down from the T-junction. Having scored all the copies of Court Secure Bases already, she knew she didn't have to keep it out of the fight any longer. So, I will say this is probably one of my most favourite Joker activations that's ever been. If you watch my video on the Moment of Glory, or our video, shall I say, we basically rated him not particularly good at killing people. And he decided to basically laugh at that idea as he lifted an Audacity out of the pile, aimed his one-shot gun special attack right at Calvin. And Calvin, who is an acrobat, had nothing to do about that because he was at full amounts of stun, so he couldn't acrobat out of the way. Joker rolled a strength dice, rolled a natural 6, which means 6 blood damage. Now Calvin was only had one health left, but the overkill was entirely Joker's intention. After doing so well with that, he decided that he was going to double up on this. So Strix, who had just removed Ace of Spades, pretty much the Joker's right hand man in my opinion, he bounded down to her, and with the 2 extra attack counters that he got from the Psychopath resource, had rolled an absolute ton of dice. Strix again was very high up on her efforting because she had lots of stun damage on her, and the Joker efforted as much as possible. So I believe he was rolling somewhere in the realm of 9 dice plus a strength dice whenever he attacked, and he put pay to Strix as well. So another 2 counters onto the Psychopath card, well on the way to scoring that, and pretty much removing the heart of the Isles offense this round. Next up for the court was O'Malley's father, the last of the, well, not the last of the flankers because you still got Ephraim out there, but he decided that he was going to go after yet another one of the Joker's henchmen, and before he moved in, he decided to pop down the suspect, so to avoid the wrath of Archie and his sad life, so he was outside the 6 inches when he did that, but he was able to mark the Hobo Clown again with the William Cobb objective card, because once you use it as a resource, it isn't put into the spent resources, it's actually shuffled back into the deck, and Salandra has had a little bit of fortune getting it out a couple of times into her hand again. So in came O'Malley's father, and he efforted a couple of times while Hobo could only effort once in defense and was summarily dispatched. That allowed Salander to move some more oil advice markers, again trying to tighten the noose. You set things up for potentially scoring an oil's tail. The court then goaded the Joker, again trying to set up a miniature that had already moved to allow that sort of formation of suspect plus oil marker plus, and this potentially someone marked as prey. So the Joker failed that, and he was sort of sent a little bit round the corner. With the death of the Hobo Clown, Salandra was able to score another copy of Talon's Claw. Next up was Archie with his sad life. He just decided to go right into the middle of the thick of things to annoy everybody with his presence. Court up next, and they just had the one action because they didn't have any audacity, and that's all they needed. They popped down a single suspect beside themselves, used that in coordination with the 2 oil advice markers down the south of the board and the Joker being nearby in order to score the oil's tail straight from her hand. Then that suspect was put to use using the mission card that she had drawn into once again to mark the Conduit King at this point as prey, potentially the next one to go down. Conduit King was the next activate for the Joker crew, grabbed on Audacity because he's worth it. Salandra at this point played the Isles Labyrinth objective card on him, targeting an enemy model marked as prey. It says if that model does not perform a movement action during its next activation, it suffers any rating 2. If it does perform a movement action, score this card. So I was free to move with Condiment King this turn, and so I would in a minute. First thing, Condiment King decided that he was going to level both of his guns at William Cobb, using the Sauce and Pickles objective card as a resource, getting some bonuses to hit. I managed again to put quite a significant amount of damage onto William Cobb, leaving him on 1 health and 2 stun health, I guess is the word. He has an amount of slow on there and poison on there. Basically, I was looking for an opportunity to run away at this point. I was dwindling on henchmen, dwindling on people that the Joker could push damage off to. And I was worried that Salandra could make a last turn push with, multiple cards being scored off, maybe, taking out my boss, taking out the highest reputation miniature on the board, all that kind of stuff, which might have closed the gap that I'd built up for myself. Condiment King then retreated as far as he could, again, in order to give myself somewhere to fall back to, multiple miniatures that I could rely upon to sort of pinball Joker's next activation between. Winding up the Isles round 3 was Ephraim Newhouse, coming in finally to the middle of the fight. He'd been sort of hanging out for a good long time, decided to barrel in and basically aim his throwing knives at the Joker, who was across the board. Before that happened, though, Salandra played the Isles Labyrinth resource, which, because the Condiment King was marked as prey, and because he was within 4 inches of an Isle advice marker, basically, somehow, the Condiment King has got so turned around that he appears on top of a rooftop beside a sewer. So Salandra was able to push him. Normally, you're allowed to move them up to 4 inches, but because he's marked as prey and beside a Isle marker, effectively you get to put them beside a sewer or anyone on the board, and so he was basically out of the fight for the rest of the game. So that attack on Joker with the throwing knives got through 3 hits, 3 blood damage, sort of chipping away at the Joker, hoping to have a go at him next turn, and with another sort of damage sponge, I guess, the Condiment King, now on a rooftop, now not able to help. Well, maybe that was going to become telling for the Joker on the last turn. So just before Thug 4 activated, actually during Salandra's last activation, she played out the Isle's Tail card. Because it is a diamond-shaped scoring time, it doesn't need to be put out when there actually is that sort of setup of the 2 Isle markers and 1 suspect near an enemy model. So it's sort of committing to it for whenever it happens. So that's out there now. Thug 4 had been holding back the entire time after being goaded away. Did actually think about the retreat around the corner, but without Condiment King there to help the Joker soak up any damage, I thought actually to bring the fight to the remaining Isles. So he set himself up for next turn by rushing up the street, revealing one of the suspects that was already there, one of the Joker suspects, and placing another Stinky Fish. That Stinky Fish, because this was the last activation, was an auto score, and hoping that things go alright in the last turn for the Joker crew. Go into phase 4, and please excuse the pun, but I won't. Salandra clawed back a little bit of the deficit this round, scoring 2 copies of the Talon's Claw and 1 copy of the Shadow Claw, so lots of claws involved, from basically getting into the scrap, removing some prey, and then 1 copy of the Isle's Tail, which is set up with a bit of suspect play as well. So on the Joker side, we got 3 cards scored this round. Psychopath was easily scored with the amount of killing that was done as compared to the suspect play that was done on the court side. Overdrive scored off Dynamite being cheeky, and it doesn't look fresh just right at the end of the turn with Thug 4 placing that last suspect. So going into round 4, the last round, scores were 34-24 in favour of the Joker. But, as you can see, lots and lots of cards played out this turn. So the all-important roll-off was actually won by the Joker. Just about. The amount of passes involved because of the people that got killed off the previous turn really did help them. So looking at what the Joker has in play, not just played out as well, but they've got Let's Dance out. So just in case the Joker does take a little bop to the head, or even Archie, if I could lure Salandra into some sad time murdering, or attempted murdering, I would get 2 points off that. Psychopaths, got my second copy played out, hoping to score that. Again, more murdering on the table. And the valuable commodities that was being carried by Archie, which was pretty much an auto score. On Salandra's side, she now has 6 cards out, which is huge. Escape Plan, which is the Calvin Rose character card. Pretty much like an Uber diehard. It's a 3-point card, and effectively the miniature has to be on the board at the end of the game. You can commit to that during any turn, but committing to it during turn or round 4 is the best time to do it because you only have to survive. So that was played out on the court. The Mission and Terrible Accident both played. I think Salandra said it was going to be O'Malley's father for the mission itself, and basically to score both of those, O'Malley could take out the Joker himself and score 6 points in one activation. Gotham is ours, again pouring more suspects onto the board. Salandra was able to point out enough elements around the board that she could benefit from. I chose one which was right beside Condiment King, in case I could find a way to reveal that one. And she had the Owl's Tail sitting out from last turn as well. No point really going into who has Audacity because there are only 4 miniatures left on each side. When we started the game, we had a grand total of 17, and now we're down to 8. So starting off round 4, just a note, William Cobb had actually, we thought, succumbed to his poison during the phase 4 part of round 3, but because of the reanimated owl trait, which actually triggers before the poison roll, Salandra was actually able to keep him alive. It didn't last long though, because the Joker had one more set of exploding teeth to fire off, which he did before moving. Fired it off, and it struck both O'Malley and William Cobb. William Cobb took that one last blood damage before he died. And then was still very, very worried about the amount of miniatures that were on the board that could actually keep Joker alive. And O'Malley himself was a pain in the backside, so I thought, you know what? Let's roll the dice, as the phrase goes. So Joker basically walked past the court, walked past the oil markers, walked past Ephraim Newhouse, and decided that he was going to offer O'Malley's father a handshake, a gentlemanly handshake. O'Malley's father was duped into shaking his hand and got an electric shock, which left him stunned, meaning O'Malley's father could not attack, could not place a suspect, could not do a special action. He could only move this turn. This was pretty huge. I then was a little bit emboldened by this, played the Confusion objective card out of hand on the Condiment King, trying to push him towards the suspect on the roof. It worked. I was able to play it, but then Salandra had a reaction in hand. She had the Owl's Labyrinth waiting there, so she basically spent that as a resource and pushed the Condiment King back the way. We did talk about it afterwards, and there were some questions into the Discord. You can probably use the Owl's Labyrinth to push someone off a rooftop, because anything that says you can't make someone fall involuntarily usually says you cannot make them fall. So probably could have dealt some damage to the Condiment King, but by the by, it kept her Gotham is ours in play. And the kill of William Cobb put another attack marker on the Psychopath's card. Next up for Salandra was the court, and for the first time, pretty much enforced, had an Audacity marker, and I put it to good use. So first thing they did was pop down a single suspect, which created that formation of suspect plus 2 out of our vice markers plus thug 4 equals Owl's Tail, which was played in the last round, so that scored. Then, funnily enough, it actually equals 2 Owl's Tail, because she was able to place another one down from her hand this activation. Because they were both played in separate activations, even though they are the same card, because they trigger in phase 3, that is totally fine. It's only if you play 2 cards during the same activation in phase 3 or the same time in phase 4, since phase 4 is considered all at the same time. So that was a nice 4-point activation immediately. She followed up on that by using the goad action on Archie, basically trying to create an opening for Ephraim to potentially take a pop at the Joker before the game ends, because Archie at that point was acting as a potential damage sponge for the Protect Me trait. Archie obviously was goaded away with ease and was now outside that range. Little Archie, much like the court, hadn't had an Audacity marker going spare all game, but at this point this was his time to shine. And the little sad life man, the little grimace on his face, moped along, popped over to see what O'Malley's father was up to. And contrary to belief, most popular beliefs, Archie actually can attack people. He is a grand total of attack 2, but I thought, let's have a pop and see what happens. He has that luck trait for a potential reroll. Moved over to beside O'Malley, helping the Joker, basically outnumbering him. Took a swing, and you lo and behold, did 2 entire stun damage to O'Malley. The important thing was, though, one of those damage was done on a strength dice, and absolutely floored O'Malley's father. Probably, punching him somewhere just below the belt. O'Malley's father hit the deck, and that was a great activation for little Archie. Really trying to hone in on win conditions, or at least victory point conditions at this point. Salandra was looking at how I was going to potentially score and how she was going to potentially score. Looking at it, she thought Thug 4 was basically the only way I was going to put more attack counters onto the Psychopath's card. So she wanted to try and keep him from doing that. And also, I guess, try and force me to have a decision whether to allow her to score the Isles Labyrinth or Gotham is Ours, because Condiment King did have an activation left where he could potentially move to pick up a suspect if he really wanted to. So she fired her throwing knives at Thug 4, only scored 1 hit, leaving Thug 4 on 1 blood damage. Thug 4 then triggered the Psychopath's Resource card, so I give him even more attack counters. Ephraim then thought, you know what, even if Condiment King is going to do something silly and try and remove that suspect, I want to be able to guarantee Gotham is Ours. So Ephraim used his entire movement to jump up onto the roof, and then Salandra reached to place a suspect. And she reached, and she was like, where are all my suspects? And then we counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, already out on the board. So there was no way that she could place another suspect up on that roof. Didn't awfully matter because I wasn't actually going to remove that suspect because it would have been a trade of 2 points for 2 points. And I didn't have anything else I wanted to do with Condiment King. But it did stop another defense counter going on to Psychopaths at this point. Last activation, probably not the last activation, Condiment King went afterwards, but he didn't do anything at all because he didn't want to trigger anything that would give Salandra points. So Thug 4, pretty much the last meaningful activation, grabbed his Venom Dose that he picked up earlier, swigged it down, bounded across the street to the now prone version of O'Malley's father, who was clutching at his crown jewels that Archie had injured, heavily bruised just before. Thug 4 had 2 friends, had a Venom Dose, had 3 attack counters from accumulated Psychopath resources earlier in the game, and put pay to O'Malley's father, making fire sticks out of him, basically with that nasty, handy, heavy axe. That put the second attack counter onto the Psychopath's card, leaving that as 2 attack counters to 1 defense counter, and that guaranteeing the score of that card. Scoring wise, in Phase 4, Round 4, I managed, as you saw, to score the Psychopath's card, 2 attack counters to 1 defense counter, and the valuable commodities that Archie was lugging around. If I remember, that was some extra special sauce that the Condiment King had dropped at one point during Round 2. So over to Salandra's scoring, we saw the escape plan card played on the court, and obviously the court were still on the board. I didn't really have an option to try and remove 4 of Salandra's suspects before the end of the round, so it wasn't really worthwhile me trying to cancel that one out. Gotham is Ours, we saw that, the amount of suspects. We had a little giggle about them being a max amount of suspects out on the board, because Salandra always loves to do the suspect game, but this time it actually came and bit her in the backside. And 2 copies of the Van Isle's Tale that were scored back to back by the court by placing just 1 suspect. That left the final score as 40 to the Joker and 33 to the Court of Owls. Very respectable both sides. Salandra, this is her first time playing with Owls, so I think she handled the prey aspect a lot easier than I did whenever I played with it. Now, Joker is probably an easier prey, shall we say, because of all those defense 2, defense 3 henchmen with low amount of health, and they're not as mobile. They need to move as a block, so definitely use that recycled through it and got the kills where they needed. I, on the other hand, liked to try and sort of mix up what I was playing. I needed to almost treat my henchmen as a resource, as like a countdown mechanic, and try and basically have enough left at the end of the game to keep scoring. I did really enjoy the new card in the Joker deck, the Psychopaths. It really seems like a strong addition, especially whenever you know that it treats you killing, your opponent killing, as a positive, and only your opponent placing suspects as a negative. And whenever you have a game of Batman that's 4 rounds long, there's going to be a turn or two whenever there aren't a ton of suspects played, because there is that maximum of 8, and there's going to be times where they don't need to play it anymore for any other reason other than trying to stop you scoring that card. And sometimes they're not always incentivized to just always cancel points. They want to score their own. So it was a fun game. Let's look at our MVPs. So Salandra's MVP first. She tells me that it is either version of William Cobb, because obviously he died and was brought back to life. Both had a pretty good outing. Both, I think, removed a miniature each time they breathed on anything. Was able to score, those marked as prey cards. And most important thing for Salandra was she really got mileage out of William Cobb's resource card that he brings, by being able to shuffle through the mission and then put it back in your deck and potentially take it back out of your deck later on, continuing to recycle that prey thing. Will say it again, same as in my game, the Oil's knives are just awful. You look at these little sort of 1 blood damage things, very easy to sort of ignore how much damage they can do whenever you consider efforts, whenever you consider the crushing that means they have to have 2 successful blocks. Then you look at, obviously they're having to block someone who's attack 4, so there's very little chance that anyone's going to get away without taking some serious damage from these guys, and William Cobb exemplified that again. For me, this may sound a little trite, but my MVP was Joker. He just, fair enough, the first 2 turns didn't do a whole lot. To be honest, my whole game plan was really to allow Salandra to come to me, and I had to work in the space that I had sort of just in front of me. But, as always, Joker brings that Showtime card, which was pretty much an auto score because no one was really going to push him off a spot. I suppose the court might have been able to goad him. But he, at the turn 3 onwards, just exploded in terms of what he did on the board. He managed to take off 2 60-plus reputation miniatures in 1 activation with, Calvin Rose and Strix going down. Again, he brings that Joker's gas, which effectively spread the seasoning, the mix scoring that happened. And you know what? He followed up in turn 4 by removing William Cobb and then absolutely invalidating O'Malley's father, who was the one that Salandra was hoping that might get a scratch at the Joker by the end of the game. Those special actions, there's a lot of choices to them. But, Joker really was the reason that I scored so well this game. Overall, this was a very interesting matchup. As I said before, obviously, the Joker clowns were definitely something that I had to sort of sacrifice as I went. So I think we both learned a lot about both crews. Salandra definitely got to grips with that prey aspect of the team. At my side, I tried to take some new miniatures, and they really did pay off. A little bit of it was teching against Isles. Archie was basically to try and sort of slow them down a little bit, make them a little bit hesitant to fully effort, because they were going to have to work in and amongst me and take those extra efforts to do anything. And then obviously filling out as many henchmen as possible that Joker could basically potentially sponge onto if someone was going to try and take a poke at him. Salandra had what I think is fairly close to what I want to play. The only difference between mine and her lists, or whatever you've seen on YouTube, was I have Henry Ballard instead of O'Malley's father. Both are pretty much similar, offer slightly different things. I just enjoyed what Ballard brings, but yeah, that speed and that just lethality on the court side, along with that boss who, again, Salandra got a lot more out of the court than I ever did, using those goad actions to great use to sort of mess with my plans a little bit and having to make me sort of figure out what I want to move, where and when. And then even the resources on the cards, I'll admit, the use of Isles Labyrinth to push Condom King under a rooftop was genius. It was never something that I ever, not that I never thought about, but I never actually had the occasion to do, because again, if you use the prey mechanic well, you get to click those sort of things all in a row. It's a tough matchup, I guess, to take the terrible accident card on the Isle side, because it was unlikely that she was ever going to be able to kill the Joker in this game. But on hindsight, the other 3-pointer from the Isles deck might have been easier to do, especially with all the killing of prey. So that's maybe a thing she might think about next time if she was playing into the same sort of matchup. Well, folks, that is the end of our battle report, and we really hope that you enjoyed it once again. We enjoyed playing this one. This was a random one that we didn't really plan a whole lot before we did, and you know what? It was a matchup that created a lot of excitement, a lot of new things. So if you enjoyed it, and I hope you did, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. We do bring these videos out every 2 weeks for battle reports. We try and fill in between with our other series, as you've seen, the Moments of Glory, the showcase of our miniatures, and the lightning reflexes, along with keeping up with any sort of news or updates that Night 2 bring us. So, as I say, like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.